My daughter's fiancé raised his glass and sneered at me, telling the room that I was just a waiter. In front of a $200,000 wedding in a mansion worth $2.5 million, he stripped away my dignity with one sentence. The guests laughed. My daughter looked down. But they didn't know what I once gave up, or the sacrifices worth hundreds of thousands. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in my small apartment, the kind of place most people passed without ever noticing. The walls were thin, the windows rattled when the wind pushed through, and the light over my kitchen table flickered now and then, like it couldn't decide whether to hold on or give up. On that table rested the one thing I could never let go of, my father's gold pocket watch. I kept it in a small box, polished now and then when I needed comfort. That night, it felt heavier than ever. Then, I turned the watch over in my palm, running my thumb across the engraving my father had once shown me. This, he'd told me when I was a boy, is not about money, it's about time and what you do with it. I never forgot those words, and yet, sitting there, I wondered if all the time I had given, all the sacrifices I had made, had been nothing but wasted years in the eyes of my own daughter and the man she had chosen. Emily, my only child, the little girl who once ran into my arms with paint on her fingers and laughter in her eyes, now grown into a woman, about to marry David Thompson, a man who lived in a world of glass and marble, a man who believed money defined worth. At the rehearsal dinner, he had looked at me as though I were dirt beneath his shoes. "He's just a waiter," he told his guests. A single sentence, but sharp as any blade. The laughter that followed cut deeper than I could explain. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. 4 years of college tuition at Berkeley, $40,000 each year. I worked double shifts at Bella Vista, serving plates to people who never learned my name, just so she could walk across that graduation stage with pride. I remembered the day I handed her the keys to her first car, a simple sedan I'd bought for $20,000 cash. She hugged me so tight that morning, whispering, "Dad, you always take care of me." And there was the first apartment, the deposit of $2,000, scraped together from tips I saved in an old coffee can. Every penny had meant something, every penny was love. And now all of it was dismissed with a smirk and a cruel sentence. Just a waiter. Just. The word echoed like thunder inside me. I had given up so much, sleep, health, nights with Margaret before she passed, so our daughter could live free of worry. Margaret, my dear wife. I whispered into the empty room as if she were still near. "Can you believe this, Margaret? The girl we raised, the one we sheltered with our love, standing by while he mocked me like that?" My voice cracked in the silence. On the wall above the sofa hung photographs. Emily was in kindergarten with a missing front tooth. Emily at 10 holding a soccer ball larger than her head. Emily in her prom dress, her hair piled high, my arm stiffly placed around her because I didn't know how to let go. And then Emily at graduation, the cap slightly crooked, her smile brighter than the California sun. Every picture was a reminder of what I had fought for. Every picture told me I mattered, even if David insisted I didn't. I looked around my apartment. The wooden floor creaked beneath my chair, the same floor I had sanded myself when I first moved in. The lamp beside me gave off a warm, golden glow, softer than the harsh light of David's mansion. His world was all crystal glasses and imported marble, while mine was linoleum counters and second-hand furniture. But in this small apartment, laughter had filled the rooms. Margaret had cooked simple meals here. Emily had once sat cross-legged on the rug, reading aloud from her textbooks. This place, however modest, held the truth of family. His mansion, with its million-dollar walls, felt colder than ice. The betrayal wasn't just about his words. It was about what he wanted to erase. David wanted me to be absent from that wedding. He wanted to airbrush me out of Emily's life because I didn't match the image he sold to his powerful friends. In his eyes, family was a business transaction, a networking opportunity, not a bond carved out of years of sacrifice and love. I pressed the watch to my chest and closed my eyes. The shock and humiliation from that night slowly shifted into something sharper. Anger, not the kind that burned wild and then died out, but a steady, controlled fire. The kind that kept you standing when others wanted you to fall. "If I stay silent," I whispered, "I will disappear from her life." That realization cut through my grief like a blade through cloth. If I let him win, if I let him lock me out, then every sacrifice would vanish, and Emily would learn that her father could be erased with a checkbook. I refused to let that happen. I thought back to the wedding plans David had bragged about. $200,000 for the big day, $15,000 on flowers, $8,000 for photographs, $12,000 for a dress Emily would wear once. Numbers that made my head spin because I knew what it took to earn even a fraction of them. My shoes had worn thin waiting tables, my back ached from long nights, and my hands were stiff from carrying heavy trays. Those rich men in their suits would never understand. David certainly didn't, but Emily, my Emily, she needed to see that her father wasn't weak, wasn't disposable, wasn't a man who could be laughed out of her wedding. I opened my eyes and looked again at the photographs on the wall. The room felt alive with their presence. I could almost hear Margaret's voice, gentle but firm. "Richard, don't let him take this from you." She had always believed in me, even when the world tried to grind me down. That memory gave me strength. I leaned back in the chair, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. Cars passed on the street below, distant and careless. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking of the pocket watch in my hand. Tick, tick, tick. Each second telling me time was moving, urging me to act. I could no longer wallow in shame. It was time to think, time to decide what to do. The first thought that came to me was Emily. How could I face her? Would she understand? Or would she take David's side completely, pretending not to notice her father's absence at the wedding? The thought twisted my gut. But deeper down, I knew Emily still loved me. I had heard it in her trembling voice on the phone after the rehearsal dinner. She apologized. She cried. She told me I deserved to be there. That gave me hope. A thin hope, maybe, but enough to hold on to. I stood up and walked slowly around the room, touching the objects that held my life together. The wooden frame of Margaret's photograph, the arm of the sofa where Emily once napped after finals, the edge of the dining table where countless birthday cakes had been cut. Each piece of this apartment told a story, stories money couldn't buy. My steps brought me back to the table, back to the pocket watch. I opened it again and stared at the hands frozen on its face. It was more than a timepiece. It was a reminder that my family had survived worse before. My father survived the Great Depression. My mother worked in a textile factory to keep food on the table. They taught me that dignity isn't about wealth, but about refusing to let others write your worth. That night, I decided to honor that lesson. I whispered again, softly to Margaret, "I'll be there, love. No matter what he tries, I'll be there when our daughter says, 'I do.'" My voice was steady now, no longer trembling with shame, but anchored in determination. I walked to the bookshelf where I kept old folders and opened one labeled Documents. Inside were mortgage papers, insurance policies, and savings account statements. I thumbed through them, not yet sure what I was looking for, only knowing that answers might be hidden in those pages. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out the deed to my apartment. It wasn't much, worth maybe $200,000 at best in this neighborhood, but it was mine, paid for with sweat, and it was proof that I had built something lasting, even if David pretended otherwise. I set the papers on the table and sat back down. A plan wasn't fully formed yet, but the seeds were there. I would not be erased. I would not sit quietly while David tried to claim my daughter's wedding as his exclusive show of wealth and influence. I didn't know exactly how I would do it, but I knew this. I would find a way in. Whether as a father, as a guest, or even hidden among the staff, I would stand in that room and watch Emily walk down the aisle. The clock ticked on. The room around me glowed softly with the lamplight. I felt the loneliness pressing in, but alongside it, something else was rising. Resolve. The kind of resolve that comes only when a man has been humiliated and refuses to stay down. "They think they've pushed me out," I murmured. "But I'll be there, and they won't stop me." The photographs on the wall seemed to watch over me, witnesses to my decision. The gold pocket watch shone faintly on the table, reflecting the light like a promise. And in that quiet apartment, surrounded by memories of love and sacrifice, I made my vow. No matter what David thought, no matter how much money he threw around, I was still Emily's father, and fathers don't walk away. Morning started earlier than usual, and I welcomed it. I brewed strong coffee, opened the kitchen window, and let the street noise roll in. Delivery trucks coughed. A bus sighed and moved on. I set my father's gold pocket watch on the table where the light could find it. The face was scratched, but the hands held steady. Time is a kind of wealth you protect with both hands. I thought about last night and felt anger rise, clean and controlled. David's smirk, the clink of crystal, the laughter when he told a room I was just a waiter. The wedding carried a price tag near $200,000. His house was worth more than $2.5 million. He believed those numbers let him erase me. Money can lie. Memory does not. I dressed in black slacks and a plain white shirt, slid on the same shoes that carried me through years of double shifts, and drove to Bella Vista before the sign flipped to open. Restaurants at dawn feel honest, tables wait, plates shine, the air smells like coffee and soap. I walked to the back and found Antonio Russo at the prep table, knife moving through tomatoes. He glanced up, wiped his hands, and waited for my words. "I need a favor," I said, handing him a mug the way I always did. 2 sugars, no cream. "I want to work the wedding." He did not answer right away. He looked at me the way a man looks at a storm front. "You are the father," he said. "You should sit in the front row." "I should," I said, "but he will not allow it. I have to be in the room, Antonio. I will pour water. I will carry trays. I will keep my head down." He put the knife aside and wiped his palms again, as if the question had brought grease to his skin. "Giuseppe still owes me," he said at last. "I can call him. He staffs the big events. If he says yes, you have a station. You will be invisible, but you will be there." Invisible sounded right. I nodded once. "Thank you," I said. The words were small. They carried a heavy load. He went to his cramped office and left the door open. I heard Italian first, soft and fast, then English, slower and careful. He said my name. He said the time and place. He said, "He is good, one of the best." He listened for a long moment, then came back with his shoulders relaxed. 11 o'clock call time, he said. Black pants, white shirt, black vest, bow tie. Champagne station near the bar, quiet corner by the wall. I exhaled. Not a victory yet, but a foothold. "I won't forget it." "You will," he said, and his mouth almost smiled. "Because you will remember your daughter's face instead. That is how it should be." Work steadied the hours. I polished forks until I could see my face in the tines, checked glassware, and folded napkins at a corner table. Routine lends a man his balance. Anger burned low, like a coal under ash. It kept me moving. Just before lunch, the front door chimed. Trouble has a sound. Footsteps crossed the floor as if they owned it. The kitchen door opened without a knock. David Thompson did not wait for host stands or schedules. He walked in like every room was his, smiled at the spotless pans as if they were mirrors meant to admire him. Antonio wiped his hands and met him halfway. "We are closed to the public until 5, he said. His voice was the voice he used with inspectors. "I am not the public," David said. He glanced past Antonio and let his gaze rest on me, the way a man notices a stain on a new shirt. I am the groom. Antonio did not blink. We work for the bride, he said. That is how weddings go. David set an envelope on the prep table, the kind that sits too tall because bills stand on their edges. 5,000, he said, conversational and cold. Make sure he is not on your staff tomorrow. Antonio did not touch it. He did not look down. The muscle in his jaw moved once. We are not having this conversation, he said. David opened the envelope, slid out another stack, and made a neat pile, like a man building a low wall. 10, he said. I am generous when people do what I ask. Antonio picked up the envelope by a corner and placed it back in David's hand, the way you return a lost glove. Some things cost more than cash, he said. Some things are not for sale. David's eyes swept the posted licenses, the thermometer logs, and the liquor permit pinned in its frame. His smile changed. I would hate to hear your refrigeration is out of range, he said. I would hate to hear your renewal hits a snag. I know people who answer phones. They move quickly when I call. Richard, Antonio said, keeping his eyes on David, would you wipe down the front windows, please? If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I understood. Remove the target. I left the kitchen and took my time with a cloth and a spray bottle. I let the glass and the view clear under my hands. When I came back, the envelope was gone. David was gone. Antonio ran water over his hands and scrubbed as if money left a stain. He will try something else, he said softly. Men who live on leverage cannot believe it fails. He will not stop, I said. No, Antonio said, neither will you. The afternoon moved in simple motions. We prepped for the dinner rush. I ironed my white shirt in the break room and hung it on a hook. I set aside a spare pair of socks. I packed a small sewing kit Margaret once kept in her nightstand. When you have served as long as I have, you learn to plan for small emergencies. A missing button can turn into a crisis if you let it. Preparation erases panic. Around 4, the phone in the office started to ring and kept ringing. I heard Antonio's voice go dry. Short replies. Names repeated back for accuracy. At 4:30, it was my turn. The call came from an assistant manager at Torino Catering. His tone was polite in the way a man is polite when he has bad news and still wants you to like him. Mr. Collins, he said, we need to clarify staffing for tomorrow. The family has contacted us. If you join our team, the reception contract will be canceled. It is a $25,000 agreement, not counting overtime and gratuity. I have been instructed to inform you directly. The words landed heavily. I pictured a stack of paychecks for dishwashers and servers and drivers. I pictured rent due on the 1st. I hear you, I said. My voice did not shake. Thank you for telling me straight. I am sorry, he said. I was told you were volatile. I do not believe that, but I have orders. Orders are orders, I said. Tell Mr. Torino I will handle it. Do not risk your crew because of me. I stood in the alley for a long minute after I hung up. Rain had washed the air clean. A cat watched me the way cats do, patient and unimpressed. I pulled out my phone and called Catherine Davis, the attorney who guided me through paperwork when Margaret passed. She picked up on the second ring, same brisk tone, same kindness hidden inside it. Catherine, I said, it's Richard. I need clear eyes on a messy day. I told her about the rehearsal dinner and David's insult. I told her about the bribe and the threat. I told her about the call from the catering office. I did not dramatize. I did not need to. Facts can carry their own weight. You are dealing with Image and Access, she said. Image is what he attacked last night. Access is what he is blocking now. As a guest, you need permission. As a worker, you need a vendor willing to stand by you. He is targeting the vendor. Do not give him any excuse to paint you as dangerous. I will not, I said. I only want to be in the room when Emily says her vows. I know, she said. Document the calls, times, names, Amounts. If he interferes with your employment, there are civil routes later, but the wedding is tomorrow. Do you have another door? I do, I said, and I felt the steady place inside me grow larger. I am going to use it. Then do it carefully, she said. Quiet wins. Rage loses. Call me if anything shifts. I thanked her. I put the phone away and leaned back against the brick, letting it press between my shoulder blades until my thoughts aligned. Then I dialed a number I had hoped to avoid. David picked up with a smooth hello that sounded like money. You should not call me, he said. This is not your lane. I am calling to tell you something simple, I said. You do not get to erase me. You can shuffle accounts. You can make threats. You can try to buy silence. I am still Emily's father. He chuckled. You are sentimental. You confuse old stories with power. Tomorrow is networking, relationships, and photographs in magazines. It is not a place for nostalgia. Tomorrow is a wedding, I said. It is the one day a father is supposed to stand close enough to hear his daughter breathe. You will be turned away at the driveway, he said. This is me being generous. Consider it a warning that saves you embarrassment. You have money, I said. I have memory. Memory is not for sale. He laughed again, shorter this time. You think stubbornness is a strategy? It is not. I have already solved this problem. Enjoy your shift elsewhere. He ended the call as if setting down a glass. I did not slam the phone. I did not throw it. I stood very still and let his words pass through me like wind around a tree that has learned to bend but not break. Then I went back inside and finished the workday because the workday still needed finishing. That is how men like me endure, one duty at a time. After closing, I drove home through light traffic. The sky over the freeway had the soft color of a peeled peach. I parked, climbed the stairs, and turned on the lamp with the warm bulb. My apartment welcomed me the way it always did, with the quiet of a place that has listened for years and does not judge what it hears. I ate a bowl of pasta standing at the counter, then cleaned the pot and left it to dry. Small order, small control. I opened the closet, pulled out the garment bag, and laid the uniform on my bed. Black pants, pressed, white shirt, crisp, black vest with a neat row of buttons, bow tie coiled like a question. I set a lint roller and a few bandages beside it. I added the cufflinks I saved from a good year, small, dignified things standing quietly beside the larger stage he had built. I slipped the gold pocket watch into the vest pocket and felt its weight settle where a heart sits. I tied the bow tie twice until the knot sat clean and square. In the mirror, I looked like every server I ever trained. But inside, something different had arrived. The uniform felt like invisible armor. It did not make me someone else. It made me more myself. Work clothes, wedding clothes, father's clothes, all at once. I sat at the kitchen table and opened a notebook. I wrote down what Catherine told me to record. 10 a.m., envelope bribe of $5,000, followed by $10,000. Thin threats about licenses. 4:30, call from catering, $25,000 at risk. I wrote names, times, and amounts. Then 2 words on separate lines. Access. Dignity. He could attack one. He could not take the other. The apartment was quiet. The stove clock blinked 10:05. I turned off the overhead and left the lamp on. I stood before the photographs on the wall and let my eyes travel. Emily in pigtails. Emily at 12 with a scraped knee. Emily at graduation, her cap crooked, my arm around her. I touched the glass. I will be there, I said. Your father will be there. The phone buzzed again. I looked down and saw a number I did not know. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Something told me to answer. Mr. Collins, a new voice said, low and careful. This is Giuseppe Torino. I wanted to call you myself. Thank you, I said. I did not want your crew hurt by this. I told your assistant I would handle it. You are a good man, he said simply. Listen, officially I cannot put you on the staff list. Unofficially, I can tell you practical things. The venue has a service entrance off the lower lot. If a man in proper uniform walks in at the right time with a crate of glassware under his arm, nobody checks a second time. Kitchens are busy. Doors swing. People assume. I am not encouraging anything. I am describing gravity. I understand gravity, I said. I have lived with it on my back. He exhaled through his nose, something like a muted laugh. I hate bullies, he said. Good night, Mr. Collins. God be with you. Good night, I said. When the line went quiet, the room felt still. I sat in that stillness and let it confirm what I already knew. I was going to the wedding. I would not push. I would not shout. I would do what I have trained to do for years. I would walk in with purpose and work, and in working, I would witness. Before bed, I opened the hall closet and pulled down a shoebox of papers. The deed to my apartment, insurance policies, a copy of Emily's birth certificate with my shaky signature from the night she came into the world. I slid the deed and the policies into a folder and tucked them under the bed. It was not fear. It was respect for the way days can spin. A man should put important things where a friend can find them. I laid the uniform back into the bag and set it by the door. I put my wallet, keys, and a small roll of cash in the vest pocket so nothing would be forgotten. I polished the watch with a clean napkin until the case caught the lamplight and flashed like a tiny sunrise. I could almost hear Margaret's voice. Hold your ground, Richard. Do it kindly. Do it well. I stood in the kitchen and listened to the apartment breathe. Pipes ticked. The refrigerator hummed. A siren far away cried once and faded. Ordinary sounds. They calmed me more than silence ever could. I leaned my palms on the counter and spoke the truth I needed to hear in my own voice. They think I have lost, I said. They think they have erased me. But the game has only begun. Sleep did not come quickly. It came in small pools, and I drifted between them. Whenever I woke, I reached for the watch, felt its cool shape, and knew where I was. Near dawn, I dreamed about Emily at 5, holding my hand in a parking lot. She looked up and said, "Don't let go, Daddy." I woke with my hand closed on nothing and tears drying. They were honest tears. When the alarm rang, I was already sitting up. I shaved carefully, because being careful helps. I ironed the sleeves again, because smooth fabric means fewer snags. I stretched my back before long shifts. I checked the kit in my pocket. Needle, thread, bandages, a pen, and a folded index card with numbers Catherine told me to carry. Batteries die. Paper does not. I looked at the watch on the table and felt the moment land. This was no longer about humiliation. This was about a seat in a room and a promise I made the day my daughter took her first breath. I tucked the watch into my vest pocket and pressed my palm over it. I lifted the garment bag and felt its decent weight. I reached for the doorknob and found that my hand was steady. I paused, one more heartbeat, to speak to the woman who taught me what courage looks like when it is wearing an apron and carrying a child on her hip. "Margaret," I said softly, "I am going to our daughter's wedding. I will not raise my voice. I will not take the bait. I will be exactly who I have always been. A man who shows up." I opened the door and stepped into the hall. The building smelled like old wood and toast. A neighbor's radio played a song from the year we bought our first used car. I listened for a few seconds and let the rhythm mark time like a drum at the start of a march. Then I locked the door behind me and headed down the stairs with the uniform on my arm. They think I have been erased. They think the story is written without me. But tomorrow I will be there, right in the heart of the celebration, exactly where a father belongs. The uniform on my arm was not just fabric. It was a promise. It was invisible armor. It was the quiet answer to a loud insult. And it was enough. Morning came thin and pale, and the hotel ballroom caught it like a seashell. I parked in the lower lot, where vendor vans lined up like boxy soldiers, and took a crate of glassware from the back seat, balanced it against my shoulder, and walked with the unhurried certainty Giuseppe had described. Proper uniform, steady pace. eyes forward. The loading dock door opened to heat and stainless steel and a low chorus of orders. Kitchens have their own weather. You blend with it or you get pushed back out. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment too below to let me know you're here with me. I slipped down the service hall past rolling racks of linens and a cart stacked with silver lids, found the sidebar where the floor captain pointed with 2 fingers and nodded when she said, "Champagne in 10, bride on site in 20, keep the flutes full, keep the smiles calm, keep the bottles off the carpet." "Yes, ma'am," I said. The bow tie hugged my throat. The vest fit like honest work. In my left pocket, my father's gold watch sat cool and steady, a heartbeat I could hold. I iced 6 bottles, lined 3 neat ranks of flutes, folded 2 towels for my wrist, and took in the room. Cream cloths, tall roses, a ceiling of crystal that made the air glitter. The quartet tuned in the far corner. Beyond the windows, white chairs waited under an arbor. The night hovered near $200,000. You could feel the money like a scent. Guests arrived in a soft current, silk, patent leather, tailored jackets. I saw a councilwoman from the news, a tech name from billboards, a venture capitalist with a traveling laugh. They clustered and spoke in numbers. You learn that sound when you pour for a living. I poured and kept my face open, the way a wall keeps its paint. In a uniform, a man becomes necessary and unseen. You learn to arrive just before a need has a voice and vanish before your presence becomes a thought. Emily entered with her bridesmaid, and the light changed for me, even if no one else noticed. She looked like herself, and also like someone I did not know yet. I stood half hidden by a column and watched her breathe, watched the tiny tremor in her hand smooth out when the maid of honor squeezed it. She did not see me. "That was all right," I said without moving my lips. "I am here." The ceremony took place outside. I stayed inside and reset the bar. Servers do not watch rings. They polish and measure coffee. Applause floated through the glass, then the doors opened, and joy came back in with perfume and chatter. I set into the long rhythm that can carry a man across 6 hours. Pour, pivot, wipe, smile, repeat. For a while, I was only a pair of hands. Then laughter came from 3 feet away, too loud to be kindness. "Is it true," a man in a blue suit said to his friend, "that the bride's father is working the event?" His friend chuckled. Talk about optics. The third man wanted to impress them both. Imagine bussing your daughter's wedding because you couldn't buy a seat. That's brutal. The words slid over me like cold water. I did not look up. I refilled a flute for a woman whose eyes shone from the first dance. I wiped the lip of the bottle with a folded towel and told myself what Catherine had told me on the phone. Quiet wins, rage loses. Pride did not leave. It found a chair and sat taller. Across the room, David stood near the head table, shaking hands as if he were signing contracts instead of napkins. He lifted his glass toward me, not a toast, just a signal that said, "I see you where I put you." Then he turned back to a tech CEO and laughed too loudly at something that wasn't funny. The floor captain raised 2 fingers for speeches. I made a slow sweep of the front tables, topping off what needed topping, straightening a Nick face scrape, removing a water ring. Emily sat beside David, her hand on the cloth like a white bird. She looked happy and careful, guarding the edges of a fragile thing. She glanced around the room with a steady, searching gaze. She did not find me. I decided that was still mercy. The first time she saw me tonight should not be in the middle of a speech. The MC warmed the crowd. The maid of honor told a story about a flat tire and a baker, and the room laughed, grateful to be steered back. Then it was David's turn. He took the mic with the ease of a man who likes how his own name sounds. One hand on the back of Emily's chair, the other making small, practiced gestures, he said, "Thank you for coming to celebrate the start of our life. We're honored to host leaders who build, invest, and guide, people who know the difference between talking about value and creating it." The words had polish, no warmth. He smiled at the right beats, and the cameras lifted like sunflowers. "We are surrounded tonight by excellence," he said. "Excellence should be named." He let the sentence hover, tasting the pause. Then he shifted. "And to appreciate excellence, sometimes you must also look at what it is not." The air tightened. He turned his head slowly, as if he might think better of it. He did not. His glass rose in a small arc that landed on me. "Take our server over there," he said. "Just a waiter. Honest work, sure. But let's not pretend we're all the same. There are makers and there are servers, leaders and followers, people who move the needle and people who polish the needle." Hands stopped halfway to the glasses. Eyes fell to the tablecloths. The sound of the room changed from laughter to carpet. Emily went pale. Her napkin lifted from the table and hovered. He pressed on. "On a night like this, it's important to remember, we don't all bring equal value. Some of us fought our way up to deserve a seat at these tables, and some of us—" "Refill the glasses." A few nervous laughs started and died. The quartet shifted. I felt my station become a stage. I was not an actor tonight. I was a man with a bottle and a choice. I walked to the nearest table with empty flutes and poured, first for an elderly woman in emerald silk whose eyes flashed with a contained fury I recognized from teachers and nurses and mothers who have seen enough. Then I poured for a man whose tie was strangling him. Then I lifted my head and let the room hear my voice. Would anyone like more champagne? It was the gentlest cut. The wire he strung snapped. People exhaled. Several called, "Yes, please," grateful to do something besides share his cruelty. I moved among them, steady and precise, the towel draped just so, the bottle balanced, the pour controlled. David's mouth tightened a millimeter, the smallest sign that he had expected something else. A flinch, a scene, the satisfaction of a weakness revealed. He did not get it. Emily dabbed at her eyes and stared at her plate until the room's chatter rose enough to cover her. Conversation resumed like a river finding a second channel. It sounded different. A quiet disapproval lived in it. I returned to my station, set the bottle into ice, and dried my hands. Inside, anger became something useful. Determination is anger disciplined by promise. I thought about the letter Catherine drafted that morning on firm letterhead, documenting interference, dates, times, dollar amounts, threats to permits, and a note about a $25,000 catering contract. I had printed it, folded it twice, and tucked it into my inside pocket under the vest. Not to wave, to remember. Paper does not make a man brave, but paper can keep a brave man from doubting what he knows. Near the lounge, 2 flat screens played a silent classic film. A young guest pointed. An older woman leaned forward. A murmur rose and crept toward the bar. The floor captain noticed, dimmed the screens with a tap on her tablet, and the light died. The murmur settled. I wondered what almost rose. Not yet, I thought. Not this chapter. Hold. The maid of honor came for water, her hands shaking from holding back tears while keeping her makeup intact. He went off script, she whispered. I know, I said softly. Sip, breathe. You did well. She took 2 small sips and blinked in gratitude. David resumed his circuit, laughing where cameras could see, measuring who still wanted to belong. He avoided looking at me. That told me more than the insult. He had swung hard and felt the room resist. He would not admit it, but he felt it. 2 city officials drifted to my bar and pretended to ask about glassware polish. One muttered, "No call for that." The other said, "None," and both walked away with their backs a little straighter, as if they had chosen their reflection for the evening. Dinner moved forward because it always does. The salmon was as good as I had promised strangers for years. Coffee poured from silver pots, sugar bowls gleamed, spoons chimed. I watched Emily dance with her aunt, and her smile looked like itself again. I thought of Margaret and how she would have placed her palm on my sleeve and said, "Hold your ground. Dignity is the last currency that never devalues." Later, the younger men from earlier found courage at the bottom of a bottle. "So it's true?" one announced to the air. "Bride's dad is buzzing?" He did not look at me. He looked through me like a boy staring at his own reflection in a window and thinking the world is out there, not knowing he is looking at himself. I set the bottle down and folded my towel. "Would you like a top-off, sir?" I asked. He blinked. "Sure," he said, trying to sound bored and landing on sheepish. The older woman in emerald turned just enough to meet his eyes, and he found urgent interest in his shoes. I poured and moved on. Sometimes the strongest rebuke wears a plain face and a quiet back. The floor captain passed my station and murmured, "You're good." Behind her, 2 hotel security staff stood at the side doors, newly attentive. Someone had tried to pull me. Someone had been told no. I did not need the details to feel the gratitude settle in my bones. Between courses, I stepped into the service hall and leaned against the wall. In the muffled quiet, I spoke to the air the way I spoke in my kitchen when the apartment felt too big. "They think I've been erased," I said. "They think this uniform is an eraser. It isn't. It's armor." I touched the pocket watch through the vest and felt the metal steady me. Margaret felt near, like a hand on my back. I returned to the room in time for the first dance. Lights softened, the band found a slow standard, and Emily and David moved through the center. They turned, and for one beat her eyes found mine. No startle, no shock, relief, small and swift. Then the turn carried her away. That single look settled something I had carried like a heavy bowl all night. I set it down. The band lifted the tempo. The dance floor filled. Joy grew brave again. I poured. I wiped. I kept the line. And under everything, a hum remained, the taut wire from his speech, the room pretending not to hear it, even as it vibrated against the china. It would take a different sound to silence it. I could feel that sound gathering, like far thunder. Toward the end of the program, the MC called for one last toast from the groom. He did not deserve another microphone, but the schedule gave him one. Cameras rose again. I checked the time on the watch. Its hands did not hurry. Mine did not either. David lifted his glass and started to thank vendors and staff in a tone that wanted to sound generous and landed on magnanimous. He gestured toward the crew by the wall. "They make nights like this seamless," he said, and the room braced for a second cut. He glanced toward me, caught my calm stare, and thought better of it. He pivoted, praised the florist, and sat down to applause that came because the cue said it should. A man from the catering team slid by and pretended to count flutes. Under his breath, "You're covered. If anyone tries anything, Captain's with you." He moved on. The sentence set a small flag in my chest. Sometimes justice arrives in tiny uniforms. A headset, a server's vest, a badge. It doesn't make speeches. It stands where it's needed. Dessert arrived. Powdered sugar fell like quiet snow. Coffee steam curled. Sinatra rolled out and made even the men who still believed in invincibility sway. I made one more slow circle of the room. When I came back to my station, I set the bottles in fresh ice and polished the flutes until they shone like small moons. As the band took a break, I stepped to the end of the bar to replenish ice and caught a shard of myself in the mirrored column. A man in a neat vest, sleeves clean, posture straight. A lifetime ago, that mirror showed a different tuxedo, a different spotlight. Tonight, it showed the one job that never betrayed me. I could almost hear Margaret tease me for fussing with the bow tie. I smoothed it anyway. 2 men in tuxedos wandered over with the confidence of people who never wait. One tapped the bar with a fingertip. "Top shelf bourbon," he said, and then, to his friend, "Can you imagine? The house is worth $2.5 million, and his future father-in-law wears a rental vest." He wanted the sentence to land like wit. It landed like a bruise. I poured, set the glass down gently, and said, "Neat." The word covered both the drink and the choice to leave his insult on the floor where it belonged. From the kitchen doorway, I saw the floor captain intercept a man in a navy suit, pointing at me. Security stepped in. Hands stayed low, voices stayed even. The navy suit looked past them at me with a satisfaction that looked too much like David's to be a coincidence. He backed off when the captain did not blink first. I watched that tiny scene with a steadiness I had learned in harder places. When people try to erase you and fail, they go looking for a pen with more ink. I checked the watch again. The minute hand had crept, stubborn and faithful. I thought about the $25,000 contract someone had been willing to sacrifice just to keep me from standing in the same air as my child. Power will burn its own money to prove it is fire. Dignity refuses the heat. The band returned. Couples reclaimed the floor. I poured a last round for the table of the older woman in emerald. She touched my wrist lightly and said, "Your service is impeccable." No more, no less. It was the kind of sentence that restores the exact inch of ground a man needs to stand on. I thanked her and moved on, carrying that inch like a small shield. On my next pass, I paused at the edge of the dance floor and let the song wash over me. The chandeliers threw light like soft rain, and for a moment the room looked like a photograph you'd find years later in a shoebox, creased and beloved. I thought about the house David bragged about, $2.5 million of stucco and stone, and how a price tag never says if a room can hold tenderness. Money buys the frame. Love fills the picture. I had spent years buying frames for Emily's life, one tuition bill, one deposit, one car, and I would not apologize for the picture we made together. The night was not over. It had changed shape. I could feel the next piece of it moving toward us, step by step, like a tide. You cannot rush a tide. You can stand where it will meet you and be ready to keep your footing. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. I looked across the room at my daughter, laughing with her best friend, at the man she married, measuring who still admired him, at guests who had decided, in quiet ways, what they would remember. I placed my palm on the pocket watch and listened to the steady tick inside the noise. I was here. I had held the line. I would hold it for 1 minute more, and then for one more after that. The chapter did not need my victory to end. It needed my presence to continue. So I stayed where a father stays, even if the world calls it a bar. The feeling of being looked down on and pushed aside is painful, isn't it? If you believe that everyone deserves to be recognized, comment the keyword, seen. Now let's see what they will do to change that. When the last words of David's cruel speech still hung in the air, I felt something shift around me, as if the walls of the grand ballroom had bent under the weight of his arrogance. The chandeliers trembled in my sight, their crystals scattering light that suddenly looked colder than before. My daughter sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap, her face pale as porcelain. Guests stared down at their plates, uncomfortable, caught between politeness and shame. I stood there in my waiter's uniform, the champagne bottle still cool in my hand, and I wondered how much further humiliation he thought I could take before I crumbled. But what David didn't know was that the end of his reign had already begun, and it wouldn't come from a loud confrontation. It would come from truth, and truth has a way of cutting deeper than any insult. The orchestra paused. Glasses clinked nervously. A murmur spread through the crowd like a whisper in a cathedral. And then, almost by accident, one of the giant television screens set up in the corners of the ballroom flickered. A technician must have pressed the wrong button, or perhaps fate itself had chosen the timing, because instead of the wedding slideshow of Emily and David's childhood photos, the screen suddenly lit up with an old film reel. For a moment, no one understood what they were looking at. The music swelled with violins, and there, projected larger than life, was a younger version of myself, 30 years younger, walking down a red carpet in Los Angeles, a tuxedo crisp, cameras flashing all around. A journalist's microphone appeared at my chin, and a bold caption at the bottom of the screen declared, Golden Globe nominee Richard Hale, Best Actor in a Motion Picture Drama. The room gasped as one body. Forks clattered onto china. I froze, every muscle in my body tightening, as though my past had come roaring into the present without warning. For decades I had tucked away that life, buried it under bills, grocery lists, late-night shifts, and the long, quiet hours of being a single father. But now it was staring back at me in black and white footage and in the wide eyes of 200 guests. The whisper spread quickly. "That's him, isn't it? Richard Hale? I thought he disappeared. Look, it's really him." Phones lit up as guests searched my name, and within seconds, the headlines from long ago were flashing across glowing screens at every table. Critically acclaimed actor walks away, at his peak, from red carpet to raising a daughter alone. David turned toward the screen, the smirk on his face draining to ash. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, crimson wine bleeding across the expensive rug. His jaw hung loose, his eyes wide, caught between disbelief and panic. He looked around the room, desperate for someone to share his shock, but found only stares of judgment. Emily rose slowly from her chair. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Dad, is that you?" I stepped forward, the weight of decades lifting with each stride. My uniform didn't feel like a servant's costume anymore. It felt like armor that had carried me through humiliation and brought me to this very moment. I took the microphone from the stunned MC, who handed it over as if surrendering a sword. The room was silent except for the trembling of my breath. "Yes," I said finally, my voice steady, carrying across every gilded wall. "That's me, Richard Hale. Years ago, I was an actor. I was nominated for a Golden Globe. I stood on the stage that many of you watched on television. I had a career. I had money. I had fame. And then one day I walked away. I walked away because there was something more important than my own face on a poster. My daughter, Emily. She needed me. And I gave it all up, every role, every contract, every dream, for her. And I never once regretted it." The room erupted, not in applause, but in an audible, collective intake of breath. People turned to Emily, then back to me. My daughter's lips quivered as tears spilled down her cheeks. She stumbled forward, and in that instant, the years of distance, the layers of manipulation, the poison David had fed into her ears, everything crumbled. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing against my chest. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know what you gave up for me." I held her tightly, burying my face in her hair like I had when she was 5 years old and afraid of thunderstorms. "You were worth all of it," I whispered back. "Every single moment. You always were." Across the room, David's face twisted in panic. The confident groom, the man who had strutted like a king in his $2.5 million home, now stood like a boy stripped naked in public. Guests whispered his name, not with admiration, but with scorn. Businessmen who had once shaken his hand now avoided his gaze. Politicians shifted in their seats, embarrassed to be seen beside him. He tried to raise his glass to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "Come on, everyone," he stammered. "Don't be fooled by a story. He's exaggerating. If he was really such a star, why would he be pouring drinks?" No one answered him. The silence was heavier than any argument. In the silence, his power died. The floor captain leaned against the bar, her lips pressed into a thin smile, as if she too had waited for this moment. The older woman in the emerald dress dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, whispering, "What a man." Even the waitstaff, my fellow servers, stood taller, their trays balanced higher, as if dignity had spilled from me and touched them too. Emily pulled back, her cheeks wet, her eyes wide. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling with both shame and pride. "I was so blind. I let him convince me you were nothing." I cupped her face in my palms. "The truth always finds a way out," I said softly. And tonight, it found us. T-Day. Cameras flashed again, but this time they were not focused on David. They were on me and my daughter, locked in an embrace that no lie could undo. David tried once more to regain control. He raised his hands. "Enough of this sentimental nonsense. This is my wedding. This is about me and Emily, not about some washed-up actor who—" But his voice cracked, high and desperate. He saw the eyes on him, eyes that judged, eyes that saw through him, and his words crumbled into incoherent noise. His allies turned away. His image, his carefully polished facade, shattered like the glass at his feet. I didn't need to humiliate him further. His downfall was already complete, carved by his own cruelty and arrogance. I simply handed the microphone back and whispered, loud enough for the front rows to hear, "Sometimes the loudest justice is silence." The music swelled again, but this time it wasn't for him. It was for Emily. The band struck the chords of a familiar melody, and someone announced, "Father and daughter dance." I looked at Emily, uncertain, but she nodded through her tears. I led her to the center of the floor. My hand on her back, her head on my shoulder, we moved slowly, clumsy at first, then finding a rhythm that belonged to us alone. Guests circled the floor, watching in reverent quiet. Flashbulbs popped, but they could not capture what passed between us in that dance. The forgiveness, the rediscovery, the unspoken vow that no betrayal could erase the bond we shared. David stood frozen at the edge of the dance floor, excluded from the very center of the night that was supposed to crown him. His fists clenched at his sides, his face pale, his lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. He was no longer the host. He was an outsider, watching a celebration that had turned away from him and toward the truth. When the song ended, applause thundered through the hall, not for the groom, but for a father and daughter reunited. Emily whispered into my ear, "I'm so sorry, Dad. I see you now. I'll never let him or anyone make me forget who you are again." I kissed her forehead. "You don't need to be sorry. Just remember. That's enough." From that night forward, everything changed. In the days that followed, David's reputation collapsed. Guests from the wedding told the story everywhere, how the groom mocked his bride's father, how the truth of that father's sacrifice silenced the room. Business partners pulled out of deals. Investors withdrew. His name became a warning, not an asset. Within weeks, he was scrambling to hold on to the house that once made him feel untouchable. Emily, shaken but resolute, filed for an annulment before the ink on the marriage license had even dried. She moved back into her childhood home, the $600,000 house that I had fought to protect. She walked through its wooden floors, touched the photographs on the mantel, and whispered that she finally understood what those walls meant. I, too, found a new peace. I sold the house not out of defeat, but out of choice. With Catherine's help, the paperwork moved swiftly, and I secured a modest apartment near the park for $200,000. It was smaller, quieter, and just right for a man who no longer needed to prove himself. The view overlooked oak trees that turned golden in the fall, and every morning I sat on the balcony with coffee, breathing in freedom. The watch my father had given me sat on the small wooden table beside my chair, ticking steadily. I often caught myself whispering to Margaret as the sun rose, "We did it, love. She knows now. She sees me." David tried to call once. His voice on the voicemail trembled, shifting between anger and desperation. He wanted forgiveness. He wanted an ally. He wanted somehow to borrow the dignity he had tried so hard to erase. I never returned his call. Some doors, once closed, should never be reopened. Emily thrived. She began working in community theater, saying she wanted to honor both her own voice and the legacy of mine. Watching her on stage was a different kind of Golden Globe, one no trophy could match. And me? I rediscovered peace. I volunteered at a local shelter on weekends, serving meals not as humiliation, but as service freely given. Each plate carried dignity, not shame. Each face reminded me that worth is not measured in titles or houses or applause. I learned this simple truth. Family is not blood alone. Family is respect. Family is recognition. Family is love without conditions. As I sat in my new apartment, the park stretching wide and green below, I said aloud to the empty room, "I don't need them anymore. I have myself." And for the first time in decades, the echo answered back with silence that felt whole. Morning light spilled gently across the curtains of my small apartment, a place that had become not only four walls and a roof, but a sanctuary where I finally breathed freely. The chaos of the wedding, the humiliation, the shocking revelation, and the collapse of David's carefully built facade, it all belonged to the past now. What stretched before me each day was calmness, the kind of quiet that feels earned, not given. I had fought through betrayal, I had endured cruelty, and in the end, I had stood my ground. Now it was time to live. I would wake each morning, open the small balcony door, and let the crisp air from the park drift in. The apartment was modest, valued at around $200,000, but it sat above oak trees that turned golden in the fall. Children laughed in the playground below, joggers passed by with their dogs, and elderly couples strolled hand in hand. I would hold my coffee mug and watch, sometimes for hours, simply enjoying that I could be part of life again without carrying the weight of constant battles. On the side table beside my chair sat my father's gold pocket watch. Its steady tick was both memory and reminder. Whenever I touched it, I remembered the journey, the years of sacrifice, the storm of betrayal, the sting of being called just a waiter. That watch told more than time. It told a story. And it reminded me daily that dignity cannot be erased, no matter who tries to diminish it. Emily visited often now. She was humbled, softer, carrying regret in her eyes, but also determination. The girl who had once believed David's poisonous whispers was slowly learning to see the truth with her own eyes. She cooked dinner in my little kitchen, sometimes burning the sauce but laughing through it. She apologized more than she needed to, as if words could rewrite the past. But I never demanded perfection. What mattered was that she was present, willing to rebuild what had nearly been destroyed. "Dad," she said one evening as we sat across from each other at the small dining table, "I see things now. I see who he really was. And I see what you always were. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." I looked at her the same way I once looked when she was a child learning to ride her bike. She had fallen, scraped her knee, and cried, believing she could never get up again. Back then, I had knelt beside her and whispered, "You're stronger than you know." Now, decades later, I whispered nearly the same words. "You don't have to earn my forgiveness," I told her. "It was always there. But you do have to learn to stand, Emily. Life doesn't hand out second chances easily. Use this one well." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes, and I knew the lesson had begun to take root. Meanwhile, David's downfall was spreading like cracks in a frozen lake. Word of his arrogance at the wedding had reached every corner of his professional world. Business partners refused his calls. Investors withdrew. The luxury car parked in his driveway was repossessed within weeks. And the mansion that once stood as his throne, a house worth more than $2.5 million, was suddenly quiet, the echo of unpaid bills bouncing off its marble floors. Eventually, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he had been forced to move into a cramped rental apartment on the edge of town. He sent me a letter once. The handwriting was shaky, rushed, as though shame pressed on every word. He spoke of mistakes, of blindness, of regret. He begged for understanding, for one last chance at respect. I read the letter twice, folded it neatly, and slid it into the drawer beside my bed. I never replied. Some bridges, once burned, should remain ashes. I whispered to myself, "I don't need his apology. I have my peace." Peace didn't mean isolation. Slowly, I began stepping into the community around me. At first, it was small gestures, donating books to the local library, attending a Saturday market, waving to neighbors I barely knew. Then one day, I saw a flyer on the community board. Volunteers needed. Drama workshop for underprivileged kids. My heart stirred. Acting, the craft I had once abandoned, still lived within me, and now it had found a new purpose. So I signed up. On Tuesday afternoons, I stood before a room of children whose lives were tangled with hardship, and I taught them how to project their voices, how to stand tall even when nervous, how to imagine themselves as kings, queens, or heroes. Their eyes lit up with the same fire that had once lived in mine, and for the first time in years I felt that my past as an actor had not been wasted. It had simply been redirected. One boy, around 12, shy and quiet, lingered after class one evening. "Mr. Hale," he said softly, "do you think someone like me could ever be on stage for real?" I crouched down so our eyes met. "Not only could you, you should. Don't ever let anyone tell you you're less. If they try, remember, you decide who you are, not them." His smile was hesitant but real, and as he walked away, I realized that maybe this was the final gift of all my struggles, to use what I had survived to lift someone else higher. Emily often came to watch. She said seeing me with the children reminded her of who I truly was, a man who gave, who built, who sacrificed. She wanted to be part of it too. Slowly, she began helping backstage, painting scenery, guiding the little ones into their costumes. It became something we shared, a bridge of healing between us. Meanwhile, David's silence grew louder. No more letters came. Friends told me he had become increasingly isolated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by bitterness. He lived alone, and though he still tried to claw his way back into business circles, doors slammed shut before he even knocked. That was his punishment, not by my hand, but by the truth revealed. And in that contrast, life painted its lesson clearly. For parents, the lesson was this: set boundaries, even with those you love most. Sacrifice is noble, but blind sacrifice can be dangerous. To give everything without teaching responsibility is to risk being consumed. I learned that too late, but I learned it nonetheless. For children, the lesson was gratitude. Parents are not infinite wells of money, time, or strength. The roof over your head, the tuition paid, the meals on the table, those are not entitlements, they are gifts. Forgetting the truth can lead to betrayal as sharp as a knife. And for the modern world, where wealth and power seem to overshadow character, the lesson was simple but eternal. Dignity and integrity remain the only treasures that cannot be stolen. Houses can be repossessed, accounts can be drained, reputations can crumble, but character, real unwavering character, endures. Sometimes at night, as I sat on my balcony, I would whisper aloud to Margaret, my late wife, "We did it, love. We raised her. She stumbled, yes, but she's finding her way back. And I finally found peace." The stars above the park shimmered as if nodding in agreement. Then came a small, unexpected event that deepened the lesson further. One afternoon, as I sorted through old boxes, I found a faded photograph tucked between stacks of forgotten scripts. It was Emily as a child, no more than 6, dressed in a costume I had sewn for her school play. She was smiling, her front tooth missing, her eyes bright with trust. On the back, in her childish scrawl, she had written, "Daddy, thank you for being my hero." I sat there holding the photo for a long time, the paper soft from years of wear. Tears slid down my face, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were the kind of tears that wash away the last traces of pain, leaving only clarity. I framed the photo and placed it on the mantel above my modest fireplace. Every time I glanced at it, I remembered. The essence of family is not found in contracts, not in inheritances, not in property values. It is found in the moments of love, in the sacrifices unseen, in the bonds that survive even the harshest storms. As days turned into weeks, I grew lighter. I spent mornings walking in the park, afternoons teaching drama, and evenings sharing meals with Emily. The apartment, once a retreat, became a home filled with laughter again. And every so often, I would hear neighbors whispering my name with respect, not scandal. I had proven something, not to David, not to the guests at that grand wedding, but to myself. I had proven that betrayal does not have the final word. Integrity does. So when the final letter arrived, David's last attempt, handwritten, begging once more for forgiveness, I held it over the flame of a candle until it curled into ash. I whispered aloud, slow and steady. I don't need your apology. I already have my life. And with that, the story closed. I was free. Free to live as myself. Free to honor the past without being chained to it. Free to guide my daughter back to the light. Free to remember that love, dignity, and character are treasures no betrayal can steal. As I walked into the park one evening, watching the sky burn orange over the trees, I said the words I knew would stay with me until the end. I finally found where I belong, and every day now proves I made the right choice. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.